Hello and welcome to the Sarnia Cinema Podcast, in which we'll take a look at the newish releases Captain Phillips, Gravity, Ender's Game and Thor the Dark World. We've also watched Now You See Me, which is available to rent and buy on DVD and Blu-ray, and John Carpenter's The Thing, which I can't say very well, and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which was screened in Guernsey on Halloween. Plus, we'll be kicking off the Sarnia Cinema Film Club. It's exciting. I'm Winter Tyson. With me as ever are Claire Mockett.
Hello.
And Russell Galloway.
Hello.
And this is episode 7, the Untitled Catch-Up. Now, before we start, I'll just give fair warning that there will be spoilers, but you should be able to skip to the films you've seen by clicking on the links below the description, and Russ is nodding, so that still works.
That will happen.
But first up is Captain Phillips. Now, Paul Greengrass directed United 93 and 2/3 of the Bourne trilogy, and here he's directing Tom Hanks, who stars as a titular captain in this true-ish story of a cargo ship boarded by Somali pirates. Claire, do you want to kick us off with this one? What's your take on Captain Phillips?
Well, first of all, my take on Tom Hanks is don't go travelling with the man. It's like we had Apollo 11, that ended up funny, and you've got like Captain Phillips and you've got Castaway. But just thinking of this film in itself, there was a lot of things that reminded me of Castaway. The introduction to it, the way it led into the story. Mm-hmm. You knew that the type of film we were heading into, an extremely intense emotion film. And the way that they set out the story, I think, was very ordinary, and yet this sense of dread that you knew something was going to happen. So as soon as you went to sit down and watch it, I think you were there almost slightly at the edge of your seat, waiting to see what's going to unfold. And then eventually you get onto the ship, you start to get an idea of the character. I didn't know anything about the story before I went to go and see the film, so for me, it was only like a taste of who these people were. But it was enough to get you involved, so when everything started to happen, that you were kind of like, this guy has got to be some kind of Harrison Ford type character to be able to preempt what these people were going to do. And it was quite claustrophobic in some areas, and I got quite... kind of felt uncomfortable because the action just pulled you in and then kept you there and kind of didn't shake you out of it, and so you were there right to the bitter end. And for me, for the emotional ride that it delivered, and the history, some of the history that I read later on, they kind of said, oh, actually this character was a lot worse than he was, and obviously they had some creative copyright over it. But all in all, I thought it was a very emotional film, and I thought it was great, and especially since the horrific kind of side of where these terrorists were from and these pirates were from. So you kind of got an idea of why they were doing it, and they possibly didn't want to do it in the first place, but they had no option. They had to kind of take this rather drastic lifestyle themselves. So your emotions were pulled around the place quite a lot because you understood their situation. Obviously, you understood the captain's situation and the crew situation. So yeah, it was. I thought it was. I don't want to say enjoyable because you don't really want to watch someone being in that kind of situation. But for what the film set out to do, I think it did really good.
Right. Now, I mean, I said true-ish because there has been these sort of mild fusses, which things have been brought about by some Oscar whorish production companies hiring a professor to check facts to try and discredit other films. That's the story anyway. Yeah. But I mean, my problem is I just found the whole film completely boring. I understand why you want things to be as true as they can be, and I understand why people get upset when they're not. I understand kind of there are so many arguments around this. But my problem with the film was, I mean, I didn't know anything about it going in other than, it's about someone who got taken by pirates. If I'd have read a newspaper article, I'd know exactly as much about Captain Phillips and the Somalis as I did through watching this film, because he seemed to be a bit of a stick in the mud kind of guy, but that obviously has its advantages. You know what? If you live in Somalia, times are desperate and horrible, and yeah, you probably would just spend your day chewing drugs and doing whatever the warlords with the big guns and sticks told you to do. And the whole film, I just kind of sat there thinking, well, is this actually going to be about something bigger? Because Black Hawk Down's a similar thing, where you've got a true situation made into a true-ish kind of movie. But Black Hawk Down, to me, was very specifically about something. That whole... It's about kind of the massive military politics of America. It's about how that's meaningless when you're actually stood next to your comrades doing something. And, Black Hawk Down, to me, said something anyway. But the only thing I took away from Captain Phillips was the image of a tiny lifeboat being pursued by 3 ginormous warships. I thought I just sat there thinking, well, this is horrible. I know what they do. I'm not trying to say they should have left them alone. They were just having a giggle or whatever. And, I think, obviously criminals should be pursued and all. But there's something really off-putting in that image that kind of made you think, I don't know.
Made you think?
I don't know who the douches are here. It's like 2 warships chasing an orange shoe. That's what it looked like at the end. And it just, I don't know, the whole film, I just kind of sat there thinking, I don't know anything more about this situation than I couldn't have found out from reading a newspaper article on it. And for 2.5 hours, that really annoyed me. Granted, it's worth sitting through because at the end, they put the camera close in Tom Hanks' face for 2 or 3 minutes, and it's devastating. And because that's what his face does to a cinema screen. That close-ups of Tom Hanks are just staggering things because he can really give it. But I don't know. But then I had big problems with United 93.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with you sometimes.
I'm not saying any of this to be contrary.
No, for sure.
Completely disengaged, thinking,
I think my
why
problem,
has he made this film?
My problem is that I think with Paul Greengrass, he's sometimes damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. And I think in taking on true life stories, which is clearly something that he enjoys doing, in this, it would have been very easy to just say, like the film I was talking about, I put on the page before, A Hijacking, which was a Danish version of a very similar event. That discounts any kind of backstory for the Somalis. I mean, for a lot of people, but for the Somalis mainly. And I think if Paul Greengrass had done that, he'd have been stuck. He'd have been nailed to the wall, saying, "Oh, you've created these stereotypical Somali pirates who have no backstory." And he has tried, in his best, like I say, in what isn't a short film anyway, to at least give some semblance of reason and motive. And like I said, this isn't solving your problem about not knowing more about it. I'm just talking about the kind of generalness of it. And like I say, even with the beginning with Tom Hanks, he's a family man. He's this, he's that. He's married to his wife, and he's just trying to give you a little bit extra things like that. And I think if he doesn't do that, people say, "Oh, you're just giving us stock characters." And if he does do it, people are saying, "Oh, it's too long," and "Oh God, it's so trite." And we all know there are problems in Somalia, but you're not solving that by giving us this stereotypical background. So I think he's always going to be up against a brick wall for that. I mean, it's very much a Paul Greengrass film, and like you said, not liking United 93 pretty much means you're not going to like this for the same reason. He's a very matter of fact director, and he wants to get. We obviously don't know how exact this is until I haven't read the book or don't know the full facts of it. But from what I know of Paul Greengrass, I would expect it to be relatively on the money to a certain degree of kind of what happened. And I, as much as you can't enjoy United 93, I mean, it's funny, I kind of probably enjoyed this film more because it wasn't death on a massive scale, and also in this, I suppose there is a semblance of the good guys, whoever that is, winning, so it's more traditional thriller-like than kind of, United 93 was, which is a crazy watch and totally wound up in all the emotion that goes with 9/11 and kind of all of that. So I really enjoyed it. I mean, I thought Tom Hanks is some of his best kind of recent work for sure. I mean, he for a guy that's about to bring out a film where he plays Walt Disney, for him to go, he's unbelievably versatile. And like I say, I always talk about Road to Perdition, which I love, is one of kind of his high points for me. And I thought this was kind of as good a performance as that. And I mean, you've already said it. I mean, the final shots are excellent and interesting and different and so I'd firmly recommend it. I mean, like I say, I do understand where you're coming from, Winter, in terms of not knowing more about it. But I don't feel the need to know more about it because I don't go and watch the film.
I'm not saying I want to know who Captain Phillips is. But I mean, the first Paul Greengrass film I remember seeing is Bloody Sunday with James Nesbitt. Yeah. And that's an absolutely fantastic film. And what that does, it takes a true situation and it gives you the truth of it. It gives you, but there's a lot of haziness about what actually happened there, because there is. But it tells you what that character. It tells you who he was and how he mattered in that situation. And with Captain Phillips, I just kind of felt, I don't know what I can look at it and say, right, Paul Greengrass is in, Somali pirates. That's an interesting topic, okay, and how that kind of, is kind of like you got your third world and your first world colliding in a very visual kind of interesting way there. But I don't know who Captain Phillips is. I don't know much about. I didn't learn anything about the character of that man other than he was pretty good in that. He seemed to be pretty good in that situation. But I can't imagine Paul Greengrass sitting saying, "I've got to tell this man's story."
But
because even the Somali pirates, they were just kind of like, well, yeah. I mean, they sort of show how desperate they are. But the leader of the band of pirates, Muse, he's quite an interesting. That's an interesting character because he's kind of, you see him being co-opted into, press ganged into this stuff. Yeah. But then he kind of takes a turn in character where he becomes kind of like a leader in the situation. And then you see that sort of dynamic. That's quite interesting. But the film's not about that. There's nothing really... It's a film... It needs a bit more invention to it to tell you something about that situation.
I think the problem is
I know nothing about hijacking from this film. I know factual things about the event, which is fine. But what inspires an artist to make a film?
Okay. That's the different thing in terms of when you get into the artistry. I mean, from what you've just said, let's say, especially with the Bloody Sunday thing, I suppose, is that they're totally different events. With totally different rationales and reasons.
But I can see why he made Bloody Sunday. I can see there's a cause running through that film. There's an interesting idea about Bloody Sunday. There's not an interesting idea about piracy here. The same with United 93. There was... at the same time, there was a TV movie that came up. ABC made it. And that was brilliant. Yeah. That was a really good... And it essentially the same thing. You got on the plane crashes at the end. But it said something about American character, and it said something about the mind-bogglingness of this kind of this sort of new terror that United 93 just seemed to just have a European guy who wanted to appease, and you kind of went, "Oh, it's a bit." I mean,
this film's about a guy. This film's about a guy that puts his own life on the line to save the lives of others, and like you say, it's a different event because that's what it's a closed story. Bloody Sunday is supremely open. It still has it having ramifications today.
But I know why James Nesbitt. I know why the person James Nesbitt played did what he did, does what he does during that film, and why he walks down that particular line. I don't particularly know anything about what Captain Phillips did this seemingly because that's his job. He's a captain.
But that's
But there's nothing. It's like if you watch, like Rescue Dawn and Little Dieter Needs to Fly, the documentary Herzog made about Dieter Denkler. There are bits where kind of like you kind of watch them rehearsing the documentary. And Grizzly Man, you wrote a thing about Grizzly Man the other day. Yeah. Grizzly Man is a rehearsed documentary. The transcripts, it's all a lot of it's scripted and rehearsed and whatnot. And that does something a bit more than just having someone tell the story. And this is what's missing here. You've got someone telling a story, it's an interesting story, but that's kind of nullified by the fact there's no standpoint on this story. I don't know what Paul Greengrass thinks about any of this, I suppose is what I'm saying overall.
Okay.
I don't know why have you made this film? That's fine. What have you got to say about Somali? But I know what Ridley Scott thinks about Black Sunday in Somalia. Yeah. Maybe I'm just insufferably liberal. Do you know what I mean, mate?
I don't know. I suppose it's interesting that it just shows different ways of watching a film. I suppose it's interesting that never crossed my mind. And I wasn't sat there feeling I don't understand why he's. And it's funny, you do think that with certain films, but you don't with others. And I suppose in a way,
and that's usually the death of a film when you sit there wondering what's going on here.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I suppose
then I've got hands up. If I'd have gone on the Monday night instead of the Sunday night, I might have gone. I might have because everyone I know. I mean, I was chatting to a friend the other day. Riveting, you wouldn't, and this is a guy not really into films, and it's it's a big ask to watch. But,
no, fair enough.
But I'm outvoted here, I can tell.
I think you might be.
Still recommended film?
I recommend it.
Yeah, definitely.
I do recommend it.
Perfect. Okay, so moving away from Planet Earth, I went to see Ender's Game, which was adapted from the classic sci-fi novel by renowned homophobe Orson Scott Card. The story takes place in a future where a defeated alien invasion has prompted the military to enlist gifted children so that they can be trained to take the fight to the aliens. Asa Butterfield from Hugo is Ender Wiggins. Harrison Ford is Major Graff and just kind of is all miserable. And, Ben Kingsley has facial tattoos and a Maori accent, which is kind of almost standard for Ben Kingsley nowadays. Now, this is one of those films where the concept is so smart that you just sit there wishing they made more of it, because it's all slightly underwhelming. You can tell there's a really smart idea at the centre of it. There's a real darkness at the centre of it. But it needs to be tougher. I mean, The Hunger Games got that one spot on, if you ask me. The film, it said, here's children killing each other, and there is a darkness in that film, but it's, apart from just the central idea. The last 5 minutes absolutely ruined it. Absolute kind of like, you just sit there thinking, oh, go away.
Yeah.
Get rid of that last reel. But I'd recommend it because it's a really tough sell. I can imagine it took a lot of convincing to actually make the bloody thing. And at the end of the day, it's a really odd, curious, slightly failed, but big money attempt to make an intelligent sci-fi film and to make a dark film for children.
And I suppose, like you said, it is a big...
That's interesting, at least.
And I suppose it is a big gamble because there's no sequel here, is there? It's a one-off book, is that right? Or...
Oh, no, there's like 13 of them.
Oh, okay, so they're banking it.
Which is why the last 5 minutes, when they go, and in the next film,
right,
and you
okay.
go, oh, no, that just looks...
Didn't need that.
But even that last 5 minutes, you go, well, that next film just looks rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and watch that.
Well, I might check this out then, if it's worth a watch.
It's worth... Wait until it comes out on Blu-ray. And there's something interesting in the middle of all of that, and the acting from the kids is spot on.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, Ender's Game is on general release at the moment, and so is Thor: The Dark World. Russ, you've been to see this one. Claire, have you seen Thor?
I have not seen it yet. I was there at the premiere, but I didn't go in by accident.
Good times.
Good times, yeah. But I just watched people walk on the red carpet, and then went off to the theatre. But yeah, yeah. I was
Russ, what do you make of Thor?
I don't know what to say. I mean, I wasn't at the the premiere, so maybe I'm not good enough. No. So look, Thor: The Dark World finds the world under threat from a new enemy called the Dark Elves, who are coming back for a second stab at destroying the universe after Anthony Hopkins' dad stopped them the first time. Yeah, good bit of knowledge. Meanwhile, Natalie Portman, playing Jane Foster, is still waiting for Thor to return, and kind of while she's out looking for him, she stumbles across the Dark Elves' kind of confiscated weapon, which might as well be called the MacGuffin, but it's not. It's called the Ether, but it is the MacGuffin. And then so the race is on to kind of both save her life and kind of stop the elves from destroying the world at the same time. I really enjoyed the first movie. The first one is kind of on my kind of top superhero films. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. It was really good. And kind of a lot of pleasure from that film came from the whole kind of fish out of water scenario they kind of put on it. Thor's kind of, this big god, and he lands on Earth and he smashes cups and he speaks in that kind of smashes cups and he speaks in that Shakespearean accent and that was genuinely kind of quite funny. And I think the problem is that that's obviously absent now because he's no longer a fish out of water. He's been to Earth. He's been around the block a bit, and so all the comedy that they kind of put in this film doesn't really feel organic. That it's along the more kind of one-liner route, and it just feels bolted on, and therefore it didn't kind of engage me in that way. I mean, as you would expect, I mean, it still looks good. I mean, they spend more time kind of in the other kind of realms in this film, and they look really good, and the acting's good. There's a lot more Anthony Hopkins, which is quite good. He does a lot more scenery chewing in this one, and gets some good kind of long monologues about the importance of being a king and kind of, being good and all this kind of stuff. And if you like what Tom Hiddleston did with Loki in the first one, he does very much of the same again. I mean, that him and Thor get to spend a good bit of time kind of bantering around, but it's all fine. I think that the problem is that it just never really kind of flowed. It's 2 hours long, and it just didn't really engage. I mean, even though at the end you have kind of two supposedly invincible people beating each other up. It's better than Superman. It's better than Man of Steel was, and it doesn't kind of feel that way. And there are some nice kind of jokes in there, a nice bit of peril that kind of still exists. But it just wasn't great. It was okay. If you like the first one, it's worth a watch, but I'd watch the first one again, kind of any chance. So yeah, it's okay. But if you like it, it's worth a watch. If you didn't like the first one, I'll steer clear of this one for sure.
Right, okay. Well, Thor: The Dark World is at the Mallard if you don't want to steer clear of it. But now it's time we spoke about Gravity, which I think is probably the big sort of release at the moment. Directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who brought us the excellent Children of Men, and starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. Gravity sees two astronauts stranded in outer space following an explosive chain reaction that destroys their shuttle. So, I mean, it's the film that I think people are mostly talking about at the moment, both for the special effects and for the acting and what, I don't know if story's right, the situation. What did we make of it? Claire, what do you think of Gravity?
Well, saw it 3D and was literally blown away by it, because I just thought before I even went to go and see the film, a lot of my friends were like, Sandra Bullock, George Clooney in space. This looks like a comedy. And I think this is one of the great things that it did for this film, was it really took you outside of comfort zones. You're comfortable with Sandra Bullock being in a really crap comedy. You're comfortable with George Clooney being like the love god of some crap comedy. And it just took you straight into the situation right before the incident happened. So you were there not knowing anything, not even knowing what they were doing out there. And you would literally you're just going to have to sit and experience this film. And when you did, the acting with Sandra Bullock, I just thought she held it remarkably well, because I don't think many actresses could have done this. Not only acting in front of blue screens and getting directions, and obviously they probably went on Vomit Comet, which is the comet that actually allows you to be weightless. They must have had some idea of what weightlessness was going to be like, because you can't go into space and research it in that way. So just the ability to just to create some of, you really felt as if you were watching people out there. Obviously George Clooney was still like, hey, you fancy me kind of thing, which was quite funny, but it was done in a way to make her feel comfortable, and you kind of just thought, what would you do if you were in this situation? What can you do? And just being there with her throughout all of it, just witnessing it. There's moments of really good tension, really good conflict, really great way to. I mean, obviously there's a lot of some themes and text going on there, like without trying to give too many spoilers away, but some of it's a little bit religious, some of it's a bit, well, what happens when we die, what happens when this happens, but it isn't done in a way that isn't forward. It's just subtext, it's just conversation that happens, that you kind of, you get an understanding of what these characters have been through on Earth, and now they're in space trying to get back to Earth, and it's a really, I'm going to stop talking now because I can go on for a while, but yeah, I thought it was an absolutely fantastic piece of cinema.
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. 90 minutes of just kind of, I think 70 minutes of them are some of the tensest stuff I've seen in quite a while in the cinema. I know, I went with my wife Katie, and we both felt the other person's hand grip quite a few times. I think the 3D, this is the first film I've seen where I've said to people, go and watch it in 3D. You've really got to. I mean, there's a great shot of sort of Sandra Bullock's character in the middle of a whole load of space. And Mark Kermode, he often chats about this. The problem with 3D is that it kills perspective and miniaturizes. And I think the example he uses is Jaws 3D, where suddenly you have a tiny little shark in the middle of a screen. And that effect was just devastating in this film, because I've never seen someone look so small in a kind of in a vastness. And I mean, it's
vulnerable as well. The vulnerability.
It's 90 minutes of. I mean, it's proper. This is what special effects are nowadays. This is what 3D cinema can do, and paired with a couple of actors who can sort of, in a very functional way, I suppose, just bring exactly what's needed to this film. I mean, 90 minutes of just... I mean, it's open water with a much bigger budget, isn't it, really? But
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know, for 90 minutes, I'll take that any day over a lot of films.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a genuinely quite a special film.
Yeah.
I think it's phenomenally beautiful, and I think there's no surprise that 3D had to almost go back in 3D in the modern era has almost had to go back to where it started, which was the NASA images in the IMAX screen.
Yeah,
that's one of the first things that most people of our generation will remember seeing 3D was either if you're in Florida at the space station, you go and sit in this big theatre, and that's what they do. They show you this film, basically, you know. So that doesn't surprise me. I mean, like you both said, it's nerve-shreddingly tense, and what surprised me the most is it's surprisingly non-commercial. I know that it's got possibly the two biggest movie stars in the world in it, but in times it veers off into art house with some of these long extended shots. There's a shot of Sandra Bullock when she's taking off her spacesuit, and she's kind of in like almost like a ballet position with she's got these pointed toes, and the camera just watches her as she floats around and kind of things like that. It's also not very subtle, which kind of surprised me. It kind of wears its ideas on its sleeve, and it doesn't take like a degree in film studies to understand what it's about. And like you said, with not only a religious context, but it's clearly about rebirth and deciding to live. And the end of it is almost like watching that Guinness commercial with the little thing that walks out of the sea and kind of goes, because that's what it is. Out
she's going to be Planet of the Apes.
Well, it was. Out she comes and she's almost learning to walk, and there are those real low-angle shots, almost like this monolith of kind of human beings kind of standing there. And I mean, it's a technical marvel. It really is. And I think the problem is that you don't necessarily, or not the problem, the best thing is you don't necessarily see that. It's just all seamless. And like you said,
it's got the big idea. I mean, earlier in the week I'd posted about Ray Bradbury's Kaleidoscope, the short story, which is a brilliant short story about a space station that blows up and the men are thrown all different directions, and what do we do for our last 15 minutes? And they argue and they bicker and they say, I'm going to become a part of a comet going around every 50. This is brilliant. I'm heading towards the sun. I'm going here. I'm going to be a shooting star. And it's got those big ideas in it, but they're they're definitely there, but they're secondary to tension.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't think, it's not a film that you get a sense of, well, this is an important film. It's important.
No, not at all.
But it's still got big ideas. It's still got sort of the patience to be quiet. And there is that, they literally explain at the start about why space is quiet.
Yeah.
And they go with it. And it was funny because walking out of the cinema, there was you kind of saw people almost like take a breath as they came out.
Sure.
But you did hear people go, oh, I didn't think it would all be in space. I didn't think it would all be in space. Didn't think it would.
Really?
And I think having the patience to just take one idea and go, there you go.
Yep.
It's
great. It's brilliant.
I think it's the best thing I've seen at the cinema this year, easily. And I think the nice thing, it's lovely to go and watch a 3D movie at last and go, and in a way not notice it.
Yeah.
And just think, wow, that was part of the cinematography. That was part of the whole package.
No, it wasn't bolted on.
It wasn't just,
no.
Tony Stark pointing at you.
Yeah.
Which, has its place. And
Yeah. No, it's excellent. If it's got to be at the Mallard for at least a few more days, if not another week. And
I think it will
if you don't go and see it in 3D, you will seriously, for the first time, I think, missing out.
Yeah. I'll be really interested to see it when it comes out on Blu-ray.
To see if it still works.
To see if it's still as good. If there's still that sense of, I think the 3D just gives it the sense of
the
space.
Yeah. I think 3D TV sales will go through the roof when it's released.
No, I was thinking about it on the way.
Yeah.
3D TV now. If this, and interestingly, there's a poster at the Mallard for Walking with Dinosaurs.
Yes, there is.
And there's this. I think this cinema of attractions, the kind of the grand spectacle stuff,
which is cool,
might start to seep back in. So that was Gravity. I think maybe we recommend.
Oh,
that
just
one.
a touch.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk Halloween movies now. The Shining and The Thing were both screened locally on the night itself. Claire, you went to see the former at the Mallard, whilst Russ was a part of the Cine Guernsey committee who have put on this, The Thing, and I think you gave the introduction as well. So we all three of us probably seen the films a billion times between us because they're great.
Yep.
That's for granted. But what were the screenings like? what was it like seeing them on the big screen with an audience? Claire, if you want to start off.
Obviously, I've seen The Shining quite a few times now in various formats.
Have you mentioned that before?
Yeah, I think I might have possibly written about that as well. But this seeing it at the cinema really gave it a different perspective. It's just obviously the image is bigger, and you just feel really part of. You can get a bigger sense of the overlook. So I think just firstly, if anyone does get an opportunity to go and see this film at the cinema, I would definitely go and watch it. Audience size, we had probably about 35 to 40 people there. It was, I think we had a few people. I was sat with someone who'd never seen it before, which is always a bonus.
Really?
Because you can just wait. I like watching people's reactions to things. I know the film inside out now, so it's I knew when something was going to happen, and just waiting for someone to jump or whatever. There was somebody behind me who hadn't seen it before either, who took a different. Who just laughed throughout all the scary scenes, because it is kind of I think if you hadn't seen it before and watch a lot of modern horror similar to what we talked about with previous films, I think you don't think it's that intense. But yeah, it's still an intense film. Even watching it, I don't know, for the 50th time at the cinema, you're going to feel quite intense. There's a couple of people, there's a couple of groups of people who came to see it. Everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think everyone kind of had the chuckles of some of the funnier bits. So yeah, it was a really good showing. Really enjoyed it.
Was it the English version?
It was the extended. It was the director's. I can't remember. It was a special version. It was like a director's cut.
No, is that the one where she goes into the ballroom and there's all the
skeletons?
Ghosts?
Yeah.
How was all?
Yeah.
What was it like watching that longer version?
It was great. I mean, seeing obviously her reaction to everything. It did.
I can't imagine what that was. What was it? Did she scream?
Just a face of shock, like what's happening? But it was. I'm really happy that they showed like the full film
good.
and stuff, and it was really. I think some people felt it was probably a bit longer than they wanted to be in the cinema, but generally everyone was really. I felt that everyone really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend seeing it if you haven't already. And then also, I get confused now because I'm reading Dr. Sleep of the film and the
sequel.
book. So in my head now they've kind of all mashed up into one big story. So yeah. It's
So Russ, The Thing at Candy.
Yeah. I mean,
how did that screening go?
Oh, very well, actually. We had about the same numbers, to be honest with you, kind of 30, 40 people. Some people hadn't seen it. Most people had seen it, but there were a couple there who hadn't, which was nice. I mean, the good thing about The Thing is that it's nice to see it with an audience, because having never seen it, I think I saw it on telly the first time all those years ago, and then caught it on DVD
like
a few times.
Kind of...
Yeah, exactly. And obviously it's such a crazy, mad, nuts kind of film that it's just nice seeing people's reactions. There are a few kind of, and a few kind of squelches of displeasure, but if that's the right phrase. But it's always good to catch a film like that, A, with an audience, and B, on a slightly bigger screen, which was nice. We've talked about The Thing before and how good it is, and although in a way, Claire, the same thing that Claire said is it's better if you've seen it before, because you have a love for it and you're then more forgiving, in terms of, let's be honest, some of the effects don't stand up, although a lot of them are practical and look good. You've got to love them and kind of because they're not great these days, but the fact that I think I said in my introduction, it's the work of a 21-year-old production designer. It's unbelievable that he did it. The things he did when he was 21, and one of the monsters is actually made by I'm going to forget his name now. Oh, the chap that did the Terminator.
Stan
Winston, that's right. I had Stan Lee in my head, which I knew was wrong. But yeah, Stan Winston designed one of the monsters, but refused to take credit for it because he was so impressed at what the 21-year-old guy did. And then 2 years later, he went on to design the Terminator. So kind of it was an amazing kind of learning curve from there as well. So yeah, very good, really interesting. So if you haven't seen The Thing, you've got to watch it, and it's great to see.
So I mean, it seems to me. I mean, I didn't get to go because babysitting and all, but there seems to be a market for this.
Yeah, there certainly does seem to be. I mean, you think if you can combine those audiences and you've got 60 odd, 80 people willing to come out on a wet and cold Halloween night to watch an old film that's been on TV umpteen times, it's great. So I mean, yeah, hopefully a bit of hope from the future from a Cine Guernsey point of view in terms of showing both older and new kind of independent cinema around the island.
I know that at the end of The Shining, there's a couple of people who went up to the guys and said, "Are you showing any more old films, classic films?"
Good.
And they said, "Oh, if you've got any recommendations to us, just email us and stuff." So I think that if people do want to see something specific, they just said, just get in contact and let us know what you want to watch.
Because I remember in the past, sort of when people have Facebooked or emailed the Mallard, they've said people want to see Looper was one that stood out.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to put it on for a week.
Yeah, and they do. They're very good with that.
Oh, that's good. That's fantastic. Okay, so moving figuratively into the living room, but we're sat in the living room now. We've been watching the Magic Heist movie. I say magic. That's the description of what's in it. Not
debatable.
Anyway, the movie is Now You See Me. It stars Jesse Eisenberg, Ilsa Fisher, Woody Harrelson, Dave Franco, Mark Ruffalo, and, well, we haven't got all night to really go into everyone who's in it, but yeah. Morgan Freeman, and blah, blah, blah. The film centres on a group of magicians brought together by an unknown benefactor to pull off a string of audacious crimes. Or are they? Etc. Did I write this? Did this film
No, you didn't, apparently.
Cast a spell on us?
No.
No, what's wrong with Now You See Me? I mean, I watched it. I found it enjoyable, but also quite annoying. What's wrong with it? Claire?
Go on, Claire.
Russ has been very vocal about his misery of this film.
It's such a mess of a film. It was all over the place. I didn't. When I started watching, I thought, actually, there's some really good stock actors here. I just thought, well, this is going to be quite interesting. And I think the concept was really interesting. And then after like 10 minutes, I just thought, what? And then after 15 minutes, I thought, 20 minutes.
And then you got another hour and 45 minutes left of it.
I just thought, this is losing my attention, because I just didn't really. I knew it was going to have some kind of big twist. Mm-hmm. It had to, because that's the kind of nature of these kind of films. And then I thought, yeah, okay, that's fine. And that's pretty much how I felt at the end. I just thought it was just too messy.
Yeah, it's pretty messy. I was genuinely looking for. I've been meaning. It's been on my list to watch for quite a while.
Yeah, it was a good trailer.
Because I was like, a bit of magic, having a good time, some crime, like you said, good actors in it. You know, good strong people. And I mean, the problem, I was hoping for like a really breezy romp and like, let's go do some stuff. But it was just, like you said, Claire, just so dull. And I said the biggest problem for me was that there's not a single person in it who isn't an asshole. There's not one that is not just a horrible person. And, they're all doing it for whatever means they want to do it for. But why am I going to sit and watch 7 horrible people gallivant around for 2 hours? It just really bugged me, and it wasn't any fun. And like you said, Winter, if you're going to do a film about magic, at least make the magic plausible. Yeah. Because there were parts that were like, well, that's not magic, that's CGI, and that's impossible. And then the other magic was basically Ocean's 11. So, so it was just like, why? It's just rubbish.
I mean, you mentioned The Prestige before.
Yeah, which is
before we started recording, we had a quick chat. And The Prestige is great. And the reason The Prestige is great is because the magic bit, it's all based on the idea that the trick is doable.
Yeah.
But how is the trick doable? And it's a film about preparation, whereas this film, Now You See Me, it has the Death Star construction workers problem, whereby they get to a point where the stuff they're doing is so audacious, it would take an army of hundreds of people. Yeah. And yet seemingly,
no one knows about it.
No one knows anything. I mean, they are some of the there's a bit with a car chase and an explosion and a character dies. Or does he? But that's the problem. Everything that happens, you go, ooh.
Everything that happens,
and you kind of think, well, so they had a bus with a car attached to the front of it.
And no one else saw.
No one saw this. And they rolled a car and burnt it. And no, it just doesn't make the stuff doesn't make any sense.
Tell you what, right, the biggest jip, right, is now, if you want to watch it, stop listening now, right? The biggest jip, right, is you're honestly going to tell me that Mark Ruffalo, right, has spent.
The Hulk.
So he's spent his entire life, right? So he was, from a kid, he decided that he was going to be a police officer, and then he was going to plan this amazing, elaborate friggin' heist, going on, and these magicians wanted to be in this.
The eye.
And that's the worst thing. It's all about them getting into the magic circle. Right?
But what is that? Is that because they disappeared?
They got on a carousel and mugged off somewhere.
Like a book of magic sort of
That's
stuff.
why
at the
it's
end.
so rubbish.
And you kind of think, well,
Back from
what?
Egyptian time.
The more I talk about it, the more rubbish it is, and that's never good.
just so
Like you said, perfectly. The Prestige is actually more ludicrous, but feels more real than this film does.
And it's about preparation.
Yeah.
And the differences with the Prestige is there's a guy, the technical consultant on the Prestige is Ricky Jay. And Ricky Jay is in practically all of David Mamet's films. And David Mamet's films are constructed tricks. All of them, whether Heist, House of Games, they're all about the idea of a con trick and a construction and the preparation that goes into that behind the scenes and what's really happening. And with the Prestige, you get that idea of tricks that are doable. Now, of course, the interesting where the Prestige goes is into a kind of a semi-mystical, pseudo-sciencey realm, but it's still in pursuit of something that is a real, perfectly plausible at the end of it trick.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's got the years of preparation. Whereas this one just felt like my problem was any one of the characters that weren't the four people. Could have turned around and gone, it was me.
yeah.
And you've gone, oh, right.
And they could have written some obnoxious backstory.
Robbed himself. Or, and this is the thing. They say, well, there is a scene where they rob all the money out of Michael Caine's account and they check your phones. And you're like, you can't even do that quickly on a phone.
No, it's impossible.
It doesn't work.
You don't know all these people's bank accounts.
Yeah.
So how can you possibly put money into them? It's just rubbish. And the worst thing is, like you said, they're doing this to get access to this great magic thing, and the stuff they're doing isn't even magic.
No.
It's not. Like you
con
said,
artists.
it's con artists and hacking if they are doing it.
Yeah.
And so what's the point in that? I hate magic like that. I hate big magic because it's always untrue. It's always, oh, there was a mirror or there was that. Close-up magic's a skill. Big magic is what can you build?
There's a
how
team
how can
behind
how
everything.
can we put this trick on?
That's why Penn and Teller are so.
That's why they're
their
so
show works
good.
And Paul Daniels doesn't anymore.
Exactly.
Because the problem is with telly is cameras don't blink.
No.
So you can watch something and go, like, that's coming out.
Exactly.
It's not coming out of her mouth. It's
And
coming
that's
out
why
of
the
his
whole.
wrist.
It's why the whole people don't saw people in half anymore. Because they know that she's underneath the bloody thing. It's just silly. It's a silly, silly, silly film, which was a waste of my time.
Did you watch the extended one? Cause
Yeah.
I can't even remember what one I watched,
I always
and I
watch
watched it on Monday.
If you get a DVD or a Blu-ray and it's kind of extended one, do you always watch it extended?
Yeah.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to see the full thing.
Do you think the 4 minutes less thing was a classic? Do you think we picked the bloated rubbish
I
version?
don't, but the problem is for every Now You See Me extended version that you wish you just cut your arm off beforehand, you get like a Taken, which is 4 extra minutes of Liam Neeson being amazing.
You just sort of end up preferring I wish I'd just watched the film. Just show me the 4 minutes.
Yeah,
I
could have just seen the extended bit, and that wouldn't have been a problem. So no, I didn't like it at all. It was silly.
Okay, well, Now You See Me is available to rent and buy,
but don't.
Yeah. No.
No.
Okay, and finally, it's time to start the Sarnia Cinema Film Club. Woo. I feel like there should be some kind of gallery-esque, Tony Hart music.
I'll fix it in post.
Okay, so here's how it works. I've written
Claire. I know, I just noticed that.
The Claire, Russ, and I will take turns in picking a film that we feel needs a bit more love, and then we'll review it in the next podcast, and hopefully we'll get some input from our listeners. So the idea is we pick a film, we watch it, you guys watch it. It's going to be something a bit special, and so to start with, I've picked Christopher McQuarrie's modern noir, The Way of the Gun. Now, Christopher McQuarrie, of course, wrote The Usual Suspect.
Didn't he direct Tom Cruise in Reacher as well?
Yeah,
Oh, no, just checking. He did, didn't he?
But yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did. This film was made in 2000, and it stars Benicio del Toro and Ryan Felipe as a couple of down-on-their-luck criminals who hatch a scheme to kidnap a surrogate mother from a mobster-stroke illegitimate businessman. She's played by Juliette Lewis. It's a film. It's full of all those people who were going to be massive. Like Nicky Katt's in it. Taye Diggs from Go is in it. People like that who were so exciting, and then. Anyway, we'll have a full review and your views on the next podcast in roughly a fortnight's time. So that's Way of the Gun, made in 2000, is the first film for Sarnia Cinema. Hands up, yes?
I just remembered one thing about Thor 2. Benicio del Toro you mentioned.
Is he in it?
Stay till after the credits. Del Toro arrives into the Marvel universe. There you go. That's all I'm saying. Continue.
Ooh.
That was a good thing of it. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Were you the only one left in there?
No, I learnt there are 2 post-credit stings in Thor. One after the credits, I'm doing inverted comma fingers, and then one after the real credits, which go on forever.
Because there's a billion FX people in Korea.
Yeah. So I stayed for the one after the credits, inverted comma fingers, but left before the last one. But the first one may have had Benicio del Toro in it. I don't want to give it away, but it might have done. It did have him in.
That's exciting.
Pretty exciting.
Me and my nephew were the only ones who stayed throughout the credits of Pacific Rim.
Right, yes, yep, I saw that.
Well worth
Good old Perlman.
Brilliant.
Still going.
One, like, cherry on top of a great film.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the meantime, don't forget to like, share, disagree, and join in the conversation at Sarnia Cinema on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll see you in a fortnight's time. And remember, movies of life, not just for runtime, which should be about 90 minutes preferably.
Good times.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.